when we're eating food, say like a McDonald's, it's just how much the nutritional balance is outweighed. And with stuff like a McDonald's, let's say talk about a Big Mac, the lettuce you get in that, let's be brutally honest, is not the most nutritionally dense lettuce in the world. I dread to think what's happened to that poor lettuce. But when we're thinking about the balance, and I like to look at foods on a scale, we want to have more foods that have a positive balance than a negative balance. That's just kind of how we have it. But we're always going to have negative balanced foods. And it's just understanding they need to be in our diets to kind of have that accompaniment that we bring the scales back to the middle.
Welcome back to the Perform Well podcast. This is the podcast for you if you're looking for performance and wellness optimization so that you can not only smash your career, but also have a better life, better relationships, and better health. We believe that performance and wellness are yin and yang and work together. So listen in as we dive into topics that are going to help you optimize your life for the better. Right, welcome back to the Perform Well podcast. We are starting season 3 of the podcast so far, which means we're now at 75 episodes, if I'm correct, which is ridiculous. And today we're going to kick off the year with the do's and don'ts when it comes to your fitness journey. And, you know, you've obviously seen myself, you've seen Dan, but we've got a third person here today, a third wheeler. Unfortunately, there's no mojitos for you, Jayden. Jayden Lee, PT. Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on it, mate. I really do appreciate it.
Lovely stuff. Right, so Jayden, we want to kind of, firstly with all guests we have on, we want to deep dive into yourself. Like, let the people know that are watching this podcast, what is it that you do and what are some of kind of your core values that come with that?
So I pretty much help normal people get into sort of better shape than they're currently in and work on their health. And some of my values are really like, recently it's been a lot more about memories as well, like memories over sort of constantly focusing on sort of the physical aspect of your health, like making sure that taking more of a holistic approach, including the sort of your mental well-being. And, you know, I think another thing as well is like consistency too, like being consistent with yourself and also holding yourself accountable too. All of these things sort of come into elements of coaching in a way. And on that note too, it's not really like my approach anyway is more of like this discipline, like just constant like willpower sort of thing. That's not really what I go about, but it's finding like sort of small commitments that we can build off of that are realistic, manageable, and something you can actually adhere to long term, and making sure that the actual process is enjoyable for yourself too, because obviously it's not always going to be enjoyable. There's going to be times where, you know, you probably prefer to stay in bed or whatever, but like generally speaking, I think enjoyment is such a important factor in all of this too.
Mate, I couldn't agree more. Like, I think all three of us, obviously I don't know what your background is, Jayden, but I kind of think that all three of us could probably agree that there's a massive element of enjoyment when it comes to training. And it might not have been the case when we first started, but at least on this level, in terms of the amount of consistency we've been able to put in over the years, comes down to the fact that we actually enjoy what we do. So I agree with you, man. I agree with you. What kind of clients do you normally train? You said normal people. What does that mean?
So when I sort of refer to normal people, I mean just general public. So like, for example, I don't train any particular athletes or bodybuilders or anything like that. It's just more sort of like the sort of normal day person, you know. One of them is like my mum, as an example. Like I trained my mum, she lost over like sort of 30 kilos, going from like 100 to like 68, like 5'2". So that's that sort of genre of people. The family, so it's that sort of demographic of people, mate. And yeah, like, but what about yourself as well? Like, who do you guys work with?
I mean, me and Dan, we've trained different people, haven't we, across the last God knows how many years. I personally started off with general population when I first started, as you do. Yeah. And then as you kind of go throughout your journey, you realise who you like to train the most. Like, for example, I've never been an obese middle-aged lady, so for me, it's harder to relate to that type of person. I'm not saying that you can't if you're not, you know, of that particular starting point. But yeah, I prefer, personally, the more athletic professional that wants to just lose that last 10 pounds and get that muscle tissue and look as good as they possibly can. But Dan, obviously you've got your ways as well.
Yeah, I mean, mine's kind of a little bit different to Nick's, and this is why we kind of we speak of me and Nick as like yin and yang when it comes to coaching, because we have our different approaches that synergize quite well. I come in the background of I primarily work with females. I work with males too, but I primarily work with people who are underconfident. and I'm there to show a level of compassion for people who have tried things before, the cycle of endlessly dieting and then never seeing the end result come through. And that's where I sit. That's where I like to sit, because I find it a really nice area to work, as you say, holistically, because there's normally more foundations that we can put down, for me personally, with these kind of people. And that's not neglecting any other kind of niche or any other kind of people, but they're the people I enjoy the most. And like me and Nick have said it before, when we've bounced ideas off each other of like, what do we want to structure programs around? It's like, who would you want to sit with a beer and sit and have a beer with? That's your ideal client, realistically, because you don't want to be in the gym PTing or online coaching people, doing calls for half an hour to an hour, and you don't like the person you train. And actually, this can come into conversation about obviously what the do's and don'ts of 2025 can be, because, you know, one of those is don't tend to work with people if you don't get along with them. Don't just go to the gym because someone's doing the same thing as you. But yeah, anyway, I think that brings us quite nicely into that kind of conversation about the do's and don'ts of 2025, because a lot of people who are going to be watching, listening this, are going to be sitting there, they're confused, they've just gone to the gym, they've tried a couple of weeks, and they just don't really know where else to go with things. So for you, Jayden, like from your own personal training experience, you've been a PT for what, is it about 6 months to a year now?
Yeah.
So again, you've done awesome since coming onto the scene. I wanted to kind of give plaudits to Jayden, because Jayden, you've grown your Instagram account up to 16K now in the last year, which is insane, like amazing stuff. We had a chat literally a couple of weeks ago, and it was lovely sitting down, just bouncing ideas, just kind of getting kind of the perspective of things going on. So for you, if you've got someone coming into the gym for the first time, they're confused, they're worried about what to do. Let's say for your niche, it's a normal person, say they're working a 9 to 5 job, but they've kind of neglected their health for the last, say, I don't know, 2-3 years, because they're focused on other aspects of life. What is a starting point for you? What would you say to them in your initial conversation?
I think what I'd say to them is having just sort of a minimum commitment in terms of showing up. So if an individual has not trained for like 2 or 3 years, I'm more considerate of them just showing up to the gym and making that a regular part of their lifestyle. It's more about sort of getting your foot in the door. And even if that's like 10 minutes on a treadmill, of course, it seems so incredibly trivial, but that's something that you can build off of, because simply just walking on a treadmill for like, 10, 15 minutes, listening to a podcast or a YouTube video or whatever it might be, some music, and just familiarizing yourself with that place, because it's an environment that you haven't been in. So naturally you're going to be uncomfortable. And rather than like sort of throwing yourself perhaps in the deep end, like going straight to sort of the free weights area, just set the goal of showing up, because a large proportion like of results will come down to how consistent you are relative to like singular massive efforts done within a short period of time. And I think just getting comfortable in that environment through just showing up, even like 2 times a week, 3 times a week, and sticking to that is like a great starting point. And once it does become a bit more habitual, or it's less effort to go there, then that's when you can start perhaps exploring some of the machines, because the machines are great in my opinion. Like if you're fortunate enough to have a gym there, because again, there's instructions, you can like easily search up online like how to do a specific machine as well, and yeah, just commitment to that, like really to the process of just showing up. I think that's a fantastic starting point, rather than having all of these expectations on sort of lifts and for you to absolutely know everything, or I'd really shift that away and to just focus on getting your feet through the first door.
Mate, I love that. And to just caveat that slightly, obviously committing to showing up is absolutely vital. But as you know, in January, everyone's showing up. Everyone's going to the gym, right? People show up too much too soon, and they try and do everything too soon. Like, just take what... I know you said this earlier, Jayden, to be fair. But take this slower approach. Get in there 2 to 3 times a week. Don't push yourself too ridiculous the first 2-3 weeks. You're not going to get rid of 20 pounds of fat within a 2-week period. It's going to take longer, So just take it easy, smooth yourself into it. Massively vital.
One point I want to just interject quickly. I don't know if you guys have seen the new kind of rise, because you guys know about the 75 hard challenge.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so I don't know if you've seen over the last, I've seen it on social, people have brought about like the 75 medium, 75 soft challenge. Like they've started to change the naming of it to kind of change how difficult it is, basically make it more achievable for people coming in. I was chatting to a lady who's starting 75 soft, and 75 soft is 10k steps a day, gymming or doing 30 minutes of daily exercise, hydrating yourself with 1.5 liters of water. What else was it? And then one set of journaling per day. That was it. That for what I'm saying. And I think that's actually quite a nice introduction, that people have actually recognized that the 75 hard challenge is creating this endless diet loop or endless kind of progress loop. Because let's be brutally honest, people committing to going to the gym and doing 2 workouts a day on top of doing 10,000 steps, adhering to diet, is just like, for somebody new starting, you're going to see results if you do it, but it's not about that. It's about the fact that 10% of people probably actually do it.
That 75 hard challenge, I was looking at it again a few weeks ago, thinking, right, let's try it, because at the end of, every year I like to do something crazy. The 75 hard challenge, the thing that made me go, right, I'm not doing this, is because doing 2 exercise sessions a day is fucking stupid.
Yeah.
Like even if you're Andy Frisella, the guy who created it, and you're a disciplined toughener, and you're self-employed guy where you don't have to go into work and you're stuck with these time constraints that the average person's stuck to, it's still a stupid idea, because they're not even just saying 45 minutes of like light exercise. They're saying that you got to push yourself outdoors 45 minutes, then you got to do another 45 workout inside a gym and push yourself really hard every single day, no rest. What fucking world are we on?
Yeah.
Like, I looked at that and I thought, there's no way in hell that would be good for my body, let alone anyone that I'd recommend it to. So what just happened to you, Dan?
1 second. That's all right. 1 second. Keep cracking on.
This is our sponsor, Elgato.
Oh yeah.
Make sure you get your Elgato, because if you don't, you won't be able to have the screen like this, unfortunately. Anyway, I'm chatting shit. So, as I was saying, Jayden and Dan, when you come back, 75 hard challenge is ridiculous. You don't have to do that to get the same benefits that 75 hard challenge gives you, which is the discipline, getting stuff done, etc. You can still do it by focusing on habits that are actually beneficial to you, right? And I'm not going to ramble on too much longer, but I think this kind of sums up the idea of that habits are the things that you should be focused on changing more than anything else. Because if you're focused on the goal, such as trying to lose 20 pounds of weight, and you don't lose weight 1 week, you're going to be deeply upset. Whereas if you focus on the habit and you keep building the habit of trying to go to the gym, tracking your food intake, etc., things start to make sense.
Yeah, they really do. And like for you, Jayden, as well, as I say, you said your niche was the kind of people coming in and starting and building up the foundations there. Let's talk a bit about your story, because obviously you've been inspired by stuff that you've done yourself. So talk to us a little bit about your background. What brought you into fitness? What brought you and made you think, actually, I want to start to help people?
So I've always sort of been interested in like PE and stuff. It has been something that's fascinated like me for sort of as long as I can remember. But however, during lockdown, I found myself doing like less than 500 steps a day. My sort of health went out the window a little bit as well. And by the time sort of the 2 years passed, I kind of looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, hang on, like I don't really recognize me. This isn't what I'm personally happy with. So I committed myself to the gym, and I've probably made a fair few mistakes under the sun. Like the first is probably skipping breakfast, having a protein bar for lunch, and then dinner. And that was sort of my routine. And don't get it twisted, I shredded body fat, but God, my life was miserable. And then I also stumbled upon, so I went through a breakup as well, and this sort of threw me in a bit of a deep end when it came to, I couldn't stop eating. Like there was a weird period where I just found myself like eating a lot, specifically like really pleasurable foods, and it's because I was like sort of comfort eating as well, like as a sort of coping mechanism. But as a consequence of me like sort of labeling foods as bad or demonizing them or whatever, I would then go and exercise that food off. And then at the time as well, sort of in the beginning of 2022, yeah, I believe that was the date. No, 2023, sorry. When I was boxing and stuff, there was such a hyper fixation on the scale weight. Like if you had to get to 65 kilos, otherwise you did not fight. And when that is constantly hammered in your head, and like don't get it twisted, they weigh you at 8 p.m. as well. I had no idea. I didn't understand a single thing about scale fluctuations. I didn't understand a single thing when it came to nutrition. I even have a video of myself like talking to my phone like about how difficult it is, because I just eat fruit in a day. I just eat fruit in a day, and then like that's ignoring protein, that's ignoring fats. I then have a dinner, and then I think I managed to put on like 4 kilos once like my fight got cancelled, because I just couldn't stop binge eating in a way, because I was just so shocked. But none of these things I understood. Like these things were just happening, and I thought they were normal. Like I thought like looking at a piece of food and to be like, oh, you shouldn't have that, like, and feeling a bit like weird and shameful around it and be like, oh,
And this is
like,
amateur boxing as well, right?
yeah, this amateur
Yeah.
boxing.
So for those that do know about boxing, like amateur boxing is brutal when it comes to like your actual fights because you don't actually know who you're going to fight until you get in there. You wait until right before you're going to go out and fight. It's absolutely brutal. Or
Yeah,
at least I don't know if the situation's different for you, but
nah. And on that note of like amateur boxing as well, like you sort of nailed it on the head right there. Like there is such an emphasis on just scale weight and just sort of like ignoring health in a way. And like I had 5 fights pulled. Like none of like I was a boxer for like sort of at least 3 years. Obviously lockdown happened, then I sort of got back into it and I committed everything to it for like an entire year and 5 fights got pulled. So that's something completely out of my control and it just led to this feelings of like failure, what could I have done better? Or, you know, like their knee hurt and then there's no goal because it's like, okay, cool, you don't have a fight now. And then it's like then what happens in a way? And it's all sort of doing things for like weird intentions, you know, like exercising to like sort of just get calories burnt on top of that as well. Like for example, in the morning would be like sort of a leg session, deadlifting, that sort of thing, terrible form. And then it'd be a 2 hour boxing session with sparring, bags, and then I did a 5 mile run afterwards. All in efforts just to get that sort of weight down. And I look back and the quality of life was really poor. It was really bad. Like I'll be honest, it was not all like sort of sunshine and rainbows. It was quite bad. And now it's become a mission of mine to solve that for other people because no one really teaches you like the stuff about nutrition or like sort of what things actually are, how you should be doing things in a way. Um, and it's just things that are like implanted like when you're growing up, oh, like that food's sort of bad, wherever it might be. And that's why it's the mission to really just simplify it and sort of come away from focusing on sort of solely physique because you know I don't demonize having like sort of a nice physique or whatever. I just think the intention matters
mm,
massively. I just think the intention behind it is important when you're doing it to sort of feel better, like um, or in that context, like doing it because you know just to get a fight or whatever. I just don't know. It did
yeah.
not help mental well-being whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, sports specific goals are definitely it's interesting like how you can apply things like nutrition and training to them, but differently. So
Mm,
like I'm actually deeply interested in sport stuff. Like obviously, I know Dan is as well. Like we help a lot of people with different sporting goals, etc. And also when it comes to our own training, and we've had to adapt our training. Like it's amazing how you can change the rules between them. And I think we could probably all agree that most people you see, especially in January, one thing you'll hear from them is the aesthetic goal of losing weight and losing body fat seems to be the recurring theme amongst most people that are in the general population. So, with that being said, when it comes to the dieting aspect, because we know it's important, what are our thoughts when it comes to tracking macros versus using other methods?
ooh,
So if I'm gonna, I'll chip in quickly. So I mean, there are various other methods, and if you're kind of not familiar with the other methods, you got what we call the palm method, which is measuring your foods with your palm of your hand. You can also use obviously calorie tracking and macro tracking is the most common one that you see. Like I feel like that's kind of a standardized thing across the industry now. If you don't track your calories, then some people, we know some content creators out there lose their mind if you're not tracking calories. Also, I think there's a level of kind of people talk about intuitive eating. You know, well, I think once you've gathered the data, you understand calorie and macro tracking. Like a lot of the time, I always say this: I don't track all the time because I don't need to. Like a lot of the time, I can probably look at chicken breast now and work out kind of how much is in it. But I think there is definitely obviously scope for these different methods to work, but it's understanding which of these methods works with a select person that's doing it. So Jayden, from like some of the people you've trained already, and maybe go into the conversation about your mum as well, what have you found to be kind of effective methods for getting them through the dieting bit? Because let's be honest, diet's one of the harder bits to deal with for a lot of people who are going to be starting and going to the gym.
yeah, so on that note, I think it's so important to just keep things simple. And obviously, the principle of losing weight is a calorie deficit, and every single method that you see online, whether it's tracking calories, counting your macros, whatever it might be, keto, kind of whatever, it all puts you in a calorie deficit. And understanding that principle and then finding a method that you personally enjoy, like, because you sort of get to go to social events, whatever it is, like what enjoyment is individual to you, and as a consequence you'll be able to adhere to that deficit and sustain it. And on that note, I think tracking calories is an amazing place to start because it teaches you so many different things about nutrition. But even a step like further or a step behind that would just be adding more foods that rot within a few days to your current diet and just adding that on top of it, because by default you'll perhaps start consuming less of like sort of the really calorie dense stuff. Like it obviously depends on what your current diet looks like, but adding in more foods that perhaps rot within a few days, or cooking your meals from home. Just because you have to cook things from home doesn't mean it like automatically has to taste awful. You got seasonings, you got low like sauces, whatever it might be. But yeah, just focusing on adding in more foods that rot within a few days, like vegetables, sort of protein, whether that's like chicken breast, whatever it might be. That's a sort of fantastic place to start, I think. And then once you get into sort of a better routine and a habit of like when you go out shopping and stuff, you naturally gravitate towards them sort of foods, the more like nutritious foods. I think that's when you can sort of like take it to the next level and then perhaps start like tracking calories, and understanding like protein, fats, and all of that good stuff. But I think to keep it really simple, like especially after Christmas and stuff, like don't go like anything like mad restrictive or anything. Just look to see what you can add. And I think like just a really nice idea is just foods that rot. And I think most people would know what that is.
Apologies for interrupting the podcast. We know you're getting fully engrossed into this episode, and we really appreciate you stopping on the video on YouTube or on Spotify if you found us through one of the search pages. Make sure to leave a review and a subscription if you haven't already. But we just wanted to interject a point here that me and Nick have 15 years of coaching experience between us, and it's only getting better as we've got better guests on the podcast. The only way we can do that, though, is with the growth of our program that we've just released. We've got a 12-month Perform Well program, which has just dropped, and we'd love you guys to get involved in it. If you want to learn more details, make sure to head to the description, as we've got our website in there, which can give you a full overlay of the program. We're looking to help career-driven professionals, entrepreneurs, small business owners, and anyone dominate their life by improving their lifestyle. Me and Nick like to claim ourselves as experts in this area, and if you want to check out some of our other transformations, I'm sure you do. We've got some amazing people who have performed so well off the back of this program. Have a cracking day, and we really appreciate your time. Let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah, so that means no Mackie D's if you're listening, because that doesn't rot. I think they had a McDonald's burger. They put it in a museum or something. I think it was like 12 years old, and someone took it out and ate it, and it was fine.
It's crazy, isn't it? It's crazy. But this is like the key thing. This is actually brings us into a nice conversation about processed and ultra processed foods, because again, this is one of the reasons that they are so cheap to make, because their shelf life is just expanded by everything they've got in them. And this isn't to demonize ultra processed foods or processed foods, because I cut an apple in half, it's processed. But like, this is a conversation that I think is very important, that when we talk about calories, specifically to this conversation, ultra processed foods tend to be higher in calories, thereby putting us more likely to be in a calorie surplus. It's not necessarily by eating a protein bar, which is ultra processed, you're going to get fat. It's not how it works. Your body doesn't go, oh, I've eaten a protein bar, got to store it as fat. It's just how it works. No, you've got to understand the principles of the reason we always talk about ultra processed foods. And also, actually, I think a lot of people coming off the Christmas period now will probably understand how they feel after eating that kind of abundance of ultra processed foods. Yeah. You don't tend to feel great. Let's be honest. No, and I think me and Jayden had a lovely conversation about this when we met up, and it was genuinely like allowing people to have that period of time when they have this kind of like little binge moment, because it kind of helps you process the emotional side of it afterwards. Not necessarily before gatekeeping it, but having that moment of eating 17 heroes or something like that, you realize that actually the dopamine rush doesn't feel great afterwards. Like you have it and you go, actually, maybe I shouldn't have done that. And you're not ruined, your diet's not ruined, but then you understand for later down the line that that's actually maybe not the best way to go forward.
17 heroes is child's play. That's
yeah,
nothing.
Well, I was going to say.
I'm talking a box of celebrations, a box of heroes, a box of Quality Street, all 3 boxes, man, one evening. But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, with the processed side of things as well, it's down to just how easily digestible they are and how quick they digest, which makes it like extremely like, what's the word for this? But okay, when you take in like very high fat, high sugary foods with very low fiber, you're gonna have this issue where they go through your gut quite quickly. your body processes them very quickly, and then you're going to suddenly crave more food just like that. You're not going to have this filling up of your stomach and this slow digestion process, which is what those high fiber and those whole based foods tend to have most of the time. So yeah, processed food, yes, 20%, 30%, 40% of the time have them. And obviously, when I say processed, I'm talking about ultra processed foods. Things like mashed potato are completely fine to have. Yeah, just because you've taken a potato and you've mashed it down doesn't make it worse. In particular, but we're talking about those things that you look at the back of the packet and the ingredient list is about 100 things long. Emulsifiers, E2O4. Something. If you see a word on it that you don't understand, that's not something you want to have in your body.
Yeah, I
That's
think
what
it's
I'd say.
always, and me and Nick had this backwards and forth conversation a lot. I think those things are having an allowance, and it's understanding that when we've got these kind of people online, and Jayden, you're on Instagram yourself, you're on TikTok yourself, we've got Eddie Abu who floats about just saying you shouldn't eat certain foods because it's got X, Y, Z in it. I think there is a level of understanding where, as much as it may have words we don't understand in it, we need context to it. So like a lot of these things, like you could pick up a broccoli and a broccoli has carotenoids in it, which are connected to cancer. So like we have to understand that the premise of it, the broccoli weighs that out though, because you've got the fibrous material, you've got other vitamins in there which balance out these other kind of um, chemicals basically. But when we're eating food, say like a McDonald's, it's just how much the nutritional balance is outweighed. And with stuff like a McDonald's, let's say talk about a Big Mac, the lettuce you get in that, let's be brutally honest, is not the most nutritionally dense lettuce in the world. I dread to think what's happened to that poor lettuce. But when we're thinking about the balance, and I like to look at foods on a scale, we want to have more foods that have a positive balance than a negative balance. That's just kind of how we have it. But we're always going to have negative balanced foods. And it's just understanding they need to be in our diets to kind of have that accompaniment that we bring the scales back to the middle, which is why balanced diet is always the word that's used. But obviously, we're kind of putting different words out there. And actually, Jane, you spoke about kind of eating and kind of binge eating as well. Can we go on an emotional level and ask like how you felt during those periods of time when you did binge eat and there wasn't kind of that stopping point to it?
Pretty awful. Like when you're sat there, like in this specific example, was like just a bowl of cereal. I just couldn't stop eating. I can't explain it unless people have like sort of gone through a similar situation, but you just cannot stop. And it's like I remember saying to myself, why can't I stop? And it was obviously like I control the actions I do, but it felt so compelling, and the level of like sort of out of control I felt was horrid. Like I never wanted to feel like that again, and it was kind of terrifying in a way, like because it just hurt so much. And there was obviously like sort of multiple personal like sort of things going on, like with the fight, breakup, and stuff like on that note. But being in that specific moment when you just could not stop, and how awful you feel afterwards. Like straight after I went out for a 5 mile run. Straight after I was like, nah, that has to get burnt off. Like there's no way that's staying in my body. Um, and you feel ashamed, like especially as a bloke as well. Like I'm meant to be a man, and I can't control myself around food. And that was the sort of narrative I told myself. And it's like, why am I ever going to be worthy of anything? Like I literally saw myself less as a consequence. Um, and I used to sort of restrict a lot of ultra processed foods as well. Like chocolate, God forbid chocolate, dominate. Anything of that kind, like just forbid it. Um, until there was a phrase I heard which like just helped me massively, and it's like the dosage makes the poison. Like too much of anything will cause maladaptive outcomes. Like I think there was a study, like I could be wrong, but like Boston runners, they drank too much water. Some of them died from like hyponatremia because there was an imbalance of their like sort of electrolytes to the or sodium to the amount of water they had in their body. Um, don't quote me on that, but I remember reading something along them lines. So by understanding that the dose makes the poison, and also understanding that when you do consume like sort of loads of this like whether it's a box of celebrations, whatever, and you just don't feel that great after, you can use that as evidence in the future to be like, right, I have the genuine choice to consume another whole box, or I could eat a whole bar of chocolate. But knowing what's happened in the past, what do I think will happen next? Cool. And it's like, because I do believe in choice. Like as long as you're fully aware of the like pros and cons of each situation, of each action you take, do what you want. you know, and sometimes you will have to sort of touch sort of a red looking circle on a black screen to realize it's an oven and it's bloody hot, you know, to realize that like probably shouldn't touch it sort of thing. Um, and then just optimizing for sort of how you feel as well, you know, because I really enjoy sort of eating nutritious foods like vegetables and like fruits and stuff because I really like the way it makes me feel and how energized I feel. It's not coming from a place of like, oh my God, it's like, oh, it's low calories and, you know, it's nutrition, it's good for me. But no, it's more about how I feel. And like, if I want a piece of chocolate, I'll have a piece of chocolate or wherever it is because that adds a lot of pleasure to my life. Like, it's just nice to have, but I won't have too much of it because I just don't like the way it makes me feel. You know, it's not because I'm just being ultra restrictive or anything. I'm just forward thinking in time and just being like, look, I've been in this situation more times than I can count. I know exactly how I'm going to feel afterwards. As a consequence, I'm just going to not do it. And even if you do, like, don't beat yourself up over it, but just get curious about why it happened in the first place. But to bring back to sort of your question as well, um, about like how I felt, it just wasn't nice. It's kind of undescribable in a way. It's just when you're in that like sort of dark place and it's just like eating, a lot of guilt, a lot of shame. You're by yourself as well, so you feel quite alone. And a lot of people around me didn't get it. Like, for example, a person I spoke to, they just didn't really understand why, and it felt me a bit more isolated. Um, and yeah, so that's sort of the emotions that accompanied that, and I never really wanted to feel like that again, and it's not happened since.
Solid stuff. It's solid stuff. And actually, this is a question that you've just brought into my mind as you said about that. Why do you think, and this is from a study that Lane Norton put into one of his videos, why do you think we have had a 25% rise in binge eating cases in like people with then eating disorders stemming from binge eating across across the world, sorry, in terms of where do you think this has stemmed from? Like, where do you think this do you think we've become more emotional with our food? Do you think that we can blame the food industry a little bit for this? Like, like, where do you think you guys, this is more kind of debate topic, see what you think, but like, why do you think this is happening? Like, why do you think we're having almost a lack of control around these things?
I think, oh, there's so many factors that go into this. I definitely feel like, well, one, food tastes amazing, right? And it's an incredible like sort of coping mechanism in a way. Like, you know, if you feel bad, like just open a sort of tub of Ben and Jerry's and you experience what you believe to be as happiness, when in fact it's just intense pleasure in a way, and that sort of tricks you. Um, and then on the sort of flip side as well, like you've got social media. Like on social media, you're very much shown like the extremes of things. Like, you know, either complete discipline, don't eat this poisonous thing, um, you know, what you're eating is shit, like it's garbage, like, and all of that when it gets constantly drilled into you, and that's the only thing you're exposed to, and what you're currently doing. And it's like say you put also these people on a pedestal that you look up to, and they're an authority, and they're saying what you're currently doing is shit, or it's awful, or like why are you putting this poison in your body, and create a very disordered outlook on that like sort of type of food as well. And then as a consequence, oh, like you fucking eat it, and then you start telling yourself about a story about it, and then you want to make yourself feel better. I think, yeah, this topic is like so many factors in it. But like before I carry on, I'm just interested to hear sort of your guys' point of view, and then I'll build off of that as well.
I mean, no, you said it, mate. Like, food is tasty, and so if you look at it from an ancestral point of view, like we're designed to see food and eat it because obviously food is scarce back thousands of years ago before our agricultural revolution took form, and so when you see supermarkets full of high calorie foods, your brain instantly wants you to just go and get it, go pick it up, start eating it, start consuming it. So we're all hardwired as humans to have this instinctive need to eat high calorie foods. And so you can't just remove that, you know what I mean, by thinking about it, by building habits. Not even habits will completely get over that a part of our brain because it comes from our limbic center. It's a very tight part of our, evolutionary, needs. So, but what we can do is we can meet our needs, and then those needs that are lower down don't become so intrusive and don't try and take form at a higher level. And so we do that through, I'm sure you've seen the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the pyramid, physiological needs, safety needs, confidence, self-esteem, etc. So the very base is like, do you have shelter? Do you have food coming in? and do you have like all your basic fundamental, human rights, should we say, coming in? And if they are being met, then normally 9 times out of 10 you have more willpower to deal with the next part of the chain. And so it's not as simple as obviously just saying that we need to stop eating, bad food, because when our willpower goes down, we're stuck in a situation where we have to, we fall back on our standards, so to speak.
Yeah, I do want to kind of say one thing there as well, because I agree with both of you guys, but I do want to say as well, I do think there's almost a lack of mindfulness around food. And I say that with a pinch of salt, because what I mean by that is think about on a day to day, how many days a week do you sit and consume food in front of a screen? I know it sounds very old fashioned, but one of the things it takes away from the genuine pleasure system of food, and I've had this with clients before who've had eating disorders, or they binge eat, or they just don't quite understand why they struggle to feel full. And like, say you've got I don't know, you made a lasagna, and like when you're out for dinner, that lasagna does tend to taste better because it's cooked differently, but also at the same time, you're more focused on the attention of the food in front. There's not a screen, you're not watching Coronation Street, you're not distracted by what GK Barry is doing in the jungle. Like, you are genuinely just focused on that plate of food. But actually, a lot of people at home, we now have become common courtesy to sit in front of TV screens or laptops or iPads and eat food. Like, I do it with my lunch. I think of it as a break, sitting having YouTube on and eating. But I tell you what, I scoff my food in about 5 minutes and I don't really think what I'm eating. And do I feel full? Yeah, kind of. But I also have a little bit more kind of like, I say, control in myself when it comes to dietary stuff. So I actually do think there's a level of a lack of mindfulness just across the world when it comes to eating, especially in higher socioeconomic countries like the UK, the US. We normally are sitting watching something every time we eat, and I think sometimes we need to take a step back. And I actually have put this in with my partner, and some people may think this is controlling. I think it's quite a useful way to spend your time. It's like, actually 2 meals a week we sit down and eat together, like without the TV on. Because like let's come away from it. In the last 20 years, we don't have that thought process. It's like, for example, if you guys have ever done journaling before, you don't sit journaling with the TV on. Like, I can't concentrate and journal with the TV on. Same thing with food. I'm not thinking about it if I'm watching something else. We're not very good at this, like kind of like loads of different multifactorial things going on. So, I mean, that was my 10 pence worth in it, because I do think it's an area that people need to work on a bit more. And sometimes I do it with clients where I say, look, please try and eat the food. Don't think about what am I watching with TV. Eat the food. And then you will feel more hungry. And it's just like a small change that you can make.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Those people, to be honest with you, like when it comes to mindfulness as well and eating, most people aren't even mindful at all anyway in anything they do, And like, if you tell someone to take 5 minutes to sit down and do nothing, they panic, and it's like, you're literally doing fucking nothing. You just sat there, and you're just trying to stop the noise in your head from overtaking your actions all the time. Give yourself 5 minutes every day. Sit there, just literally try and allow the thoughts to go through your mind without even let them take hold of what you're actually doing, and see if you can have this concentration period where you're not allowing these thoughts to like keep coming in and taking over what you're trying to think about. People struggle with this stuff.
On that note too, as well, I think something that's also um, increased over the like sort of past few years as well, like sort of stress, and like a lack of ways to manage that stress too. Again, because often it's resorted to things that are quick, convenient, whether that is food or like sort of doom scrolling on your phone, and then that just accumulates as well. And then again, it sort of like creates this cycle where you attach food to feeling better, and then you just constantly resort to that as well. Compared to things like doing exercises of sort of like stress management or walking or ensuring you're getting like enough sleep. Obviously, there's going to be certain stressful factors that won't be solved with a night's sleep. I'm not sitting here and saying like a massive, like, say you lose your job, that's going to be solved. I'm not trying to be sort of belittling in that regard. But in terms of like sort of small manageable pieces of stress, like work stuff, like having time to actually switch off, be calm, and just like learn them stress levels on that basis and solving that issue at the core, I think is also massively helpful. Like just stress management too. And also what Dan mentioned about being mindful with food as well. one thing that really helped me was actually understanding that although calories is just a calorie, um, the way food is constructed can also influence like sort of how hungry you feel or how satisfied you are. When I started to understand that like most ultra processed food is like really high in sodium as a like sort of this perfect combination between like fats to carbohydrates, again back to sodium as well, it sort of it tastes bloody amazing, like you know, because these are such rare things that you did not get back in the day. Like if you think about it, if you're just hunting, mate, and like fat obviously has 9 calories per gram, like that is probably one of the most valuable things that you can find. Whereas now it's just sort of pumped into food and stuff, and then you got to think about the texture of food as well, like sort of like crisps, they go into like crunchy and then it's like soft and then it's like this, it's just this mad experience, like what's going on in like sort of your mouth in a way, like with chocolate too, like, and understanding these principles like and how fast something you can consume as well will also influence like how satisfied you feel, like just understanding these components of different foods and like eating rate or you know like fiber content, I think that can also massively help you be more mindful too. um and yeah, just sort of education around that topic as well.
No, I agree. I think what you
Yeah.
spoke about there, Jaden, as well, is what you call vanishing calories, is what crisps, like cheese puffs, that kind of stuff. And actually, I think some of the stuff you've spoken about there, they recently went into like a BBC Good Food documentary. I don't know if you saw that one at all. There was a massive viral clip that went around on TikTok for ages, and it was about how the ultra processed foods coming into play and how easy and palatable it is, and how the obesity rates have risen since 1975 much more rapidly than prior to that. So they were trying to assess what's happened in the food industry. Well, food science has moved forward so much over the last however many years, literally going down to the point of like if you make a lasagna, I'll go back to that because I really fancy lasagna. If I go back to that, you make a lasagna versus you buy one in the shops. The one you buy in the shops will be a lot softer than the one that you'll be making at home, because that softness disturbs our at the center of our brain. I don't know the whole ins and outs of it, but it mixes up those emotions that we have of it, making us feel less full, because normally we associate crunch and density with the feeling of fullness. So, you know, that's an interesting thing that can come into it too. But I do want to kind of cycle back a little bit because we've gone down. I really like this rabbit hole. It's great. It's really, really nice. And I love talking about it. But I want to go back to the initial question that we wanted to answer, which is about the do's and don'ts of going in the gym. So we've spoken a bit on not going in too intense. Don't chuck yourself in at a 75 hard challenge and split a spleen or something. Don't do that. Be more mindful around the food you're eating. Start with a basic point there. I think one key thing that I'd like to delve into a little bit is how does a normal 9 till 5er structure a routine in which going to the gym is manageable and achievable? How many days a week should they be training? Like let's talk a little bit about that.
I think what's a really like sitting down and actually having a look at like what's a realistic commitment they can do. Like obviously it depends like on if they have kids or whatever. Like can they perhaps, again, I've never had sort of a 9 to 5, but based off like sort of the clients I've worked with and stuff, it's like could you perhaps go to bed even just 30 minutes earlier and wake up 30 minutes just to simply go to the gym in the morning? Because I find, although I'm a personal trainer and stuff, like I really enjoy getting things done and over with, because the longer I leave a task, especially gym, and it's like 6 p.m., I'm like, ah, I just cannot be fucked. I'll be honest, like I really prefer doing things earlier in the day because it just helps me out massively. So I think just ticking the box and getting it done and off with is really useful. And like you mentioned about how many times should someone show up a week, I think it's always the better off start too small because you can build off of that. If you go in way too hard too fast and say you like quote unquote like burnout or you just not really enjoying the gym whatsoever, you sort of get a really negative experience of that and you're not really going to be excited or anticipating to want to start again anytime soon. So I think really starting off small and then building off of that. I would personally recommend just waking up earlier as well. And like it doesn't have to be like an hour and 30 minute like solid workout. It could just be 20 minutes. Like any like again, especially in the offset of January and stuff, like making it an actual habit and commitment to the process. I think just showing up like is again like 20 minutes, you know, something like cardio, wherever it might be, just something. Um But yeah, what about yourself?
I think setting. Go on, Nick. You go. You go. Actually.
No,
In
go
that
for it.
one.
Go for it.
Well, I was going to say, like, I don't know if you guys have followed a guy called Higher Up Wellness. He's done insane this year. He went from 100k followers on TikTok to a mil. Very informative guy, comes from a very like sciencey background, but he spoke on the context of he set himself. This is what he even does. He does 3 little tasks, 3 non-negotiables he has every single day, or every single week, should I say? And it's like he trains. Will complete all his workouts in the week, whether that's 2, whether that's 3, whether that's 4, whatever it is in his training block. He'll make sure that he does his daily journaling, and then he'll make sure he gets at least like 7.5k steps a day. And all of those are realistic and attainable tasks. And anyone watching this and sitting and thinking, what is a practical thing I can take away from this podcast? Please just get a pen and paper, write out what your goal is, and write one habit that correlates with it. That's all you got to do, and just do that daily. That obviously, if that habit is commit to a 5k run every day, probably won't be attainable. Brutally honest with you, you're going to injure yourself at some point in time from overtraining. But I'd recommend just doing, for example, if it's like I want to lose 5 kg of body fat. Where do we start with that? We start with calories. Okay, well, how do I do calories? I'm going to commit to weighing out at least 1 meal every day. That nice and easy stuff. Anyway, roll on to you, Nick.
No, that's cool. That's fair. That's basically what I was going to say about breaking down, your goal into daily processes and following them.
Yeah.
Nothing else to add to it.
Yeah, we are very much like creatures of habit. We have to remember this. We are very routine based. Like I have 2 whiteboards for God's sake. It's that level of kind of like obsession about routine that leads us. You notice that people don't get results, don't have a routine, because one of the most common things that people come to us in the start of Jan is I'd like to get into a fitter, healthier routine. And it's always that key topic point. And again, that's where us as coaches come in. Obviously, all 3 of us can do that job. Like we can come in and create that routine for people and create that understanding. We've spoken on a deeper level about stuff today, about like mindfulness in food. This is stuff that normally comes later down the line for people as well. And it's just building up these habits bit by bit. Build it brick by brick. Don't fucking chuck a house on top of it straight away, It's never going to work. But what I want to do is I want to kind of round off the podcast now as well. And kind of like, we want to leave everyone with a bit of kind of information. So, Jayden, this one's for you. And this is kind of like almost a case study coming your way. And I want your kind of honest answer. And I just want brutal honesty, because your content delivers brutal honesty. And that's what I want to hear. So in terms of, if I had a lady coming through the door, she's 40 years old, and she's got a chronic health condition like endometriosis or something like that. She struggled for a while with her weight, but she's starting to get to the back end of like any kind of really bad flare-ups and wants to start to the gym. What would you give her as like a genuine piece of advice? She's come to you and she said, Jayden, where should I start? What would you say to this woman?
I think I would start with, not to be like woo woo or like mindset thing, but like understanding why.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why does this goal actually matter to you? And I know it might not be like sort of the most practical sense, as in like something you could probably do like right away, but like just considering like why this actually means to you, like why sort of like how will losing the weight benefit you. So my mum won't mind this, but my mum is ironically like someone that also has endometriosis, and she got to the point where her flare-ups were so bad that she'd be like debilitated for days. And when she got to the position where it was like, I need to lose the weight because my quality of life will improve so much and I will actually add years to my life. Because when there's like moments that you don't want to show up, going back to sort of like just showing up twice a week, trust me, when you remind yourself of that, you will find a way to make it happen. Mm-hmm. So having like sort of an intrinsic reason like why this matters to you and like how it will actually help you is massive. And then sort of looking at like showing up to the gym again, like that commitment, and just start familiarizing yourself with like the machines and stuff. Like again, like YouTube is a great place, but I think getting your why, getting comfortable at the place, and just going there on a regular basis and having that non-negotiable commitment, and then you can build off of that. You can go to the machines, and then later you could even do free weights, you can even include a barbell, but ignoring all that, just show up and actually know why as well. I think that's tantamount. That's got to be one of the most important.
I think that's spot on.
Yeah.
That's spot on. Yeah, I think to build on that a little bit as well, like if we want to put it into context for some people, a lot of people here will love a good coffee shop. When you first go to a new coffee shop and you think this is going to be a regular occurrence for you, it's quite daunting. Like you don't really know anyone in there. There'll be some old biddies nattering away, and people will look at you when you come in, and you just won't know where you are. Similar thing to when you go to the gym. Like people are nice. If you're going to have any kind of level of respect from people, it's going to be the gym. We're all in there to better ourselves, improve our health and well-being. Like and genuinely, as Jayden said, get comfortable with that kind of place. The more comfortable you come with a gym, the better results you tend to get later down the line, because it comes a second home, like when you start to really build it, and especially if you're coming from kind of, there's that emotional level driving you behind. So yeah, brilliant, awesome. But yeah, we're going to round off there, Jayden. We really appreciate you coming on today, mate, and obviously super stuff for last year building up your account. What we tend to do with our guests at the end of the podcast, we tend to plug them away. So where can people find you, and where can people find about your services as well?
So my username is just Jayden Lee PT on pretty much everything. You can get in contact mainly through Instagram. It's always me that answers the messages, and it's just JAYDNLEEPT. And yeah, like again, thank you for the opportunity to even have me on. It's a privilege. I didn't think
Nice speaking to you, man.
it's a
Yeah,
pleasure
we
meeting you as
appreciate
well,
it.
mate.
Yeah, appreciate
It's
it.
awesome stuff. And again, thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening. Obviously, this is season 3 of the podcast. And fun fact, a year ago, we were sat on Nick's sofa thinking we were doing a casting couch. But here we are. We are filming with a very successful young man in the industry, and we're hoping to have more successful guests on coming later down the line. So a massive appreciation to all you guys. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, and make sure to check out Jayden's account as well as mine and Nick's. And we're going to continue pumping out episodes every single week now. And we've got some amazing stuff coming on the production side, which we believe you will see with this podcast. So stay tuned. We'll catch you guys later. And yeah, ta-ra.